Greetings, listener, and as always, welcome to MJV Tech Innovation Talks. By now, you should already know the format, but for those of you tuning in for the first time, I'm Paul Duarte, your host here at Tech Innovation Talks, where we provide concise, illuminating, on-point conversations on the most relevant tech and innovation topics. Those discussions are available on all your favorite platforms, including YouTube, Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, where you can find our back catalog, which includes discussions on food tech, retail, and business innovation. But what's the topic of discussion this week, I hear you ask? Well, let me put you out of your misery by revealing that today's episode is centered around finance, more specifically, leading financial transformation. And my guests? Well, to discuss this all-important topic, we bring you an all-star panel. Let me first warmly welcome Barclays Chief Digital Officer, Mr. Ashok Vaswani. Hi, Ashok. Thanks for joining us today. First of all, how are you? And maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit about your work background and your trajectory in becoming one of Barclays' top digital leaders.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Really appreciate you having me on the show. We have seen a lot of change in the last 328 years, and we continue to change as the circumstances demand. And today's demand is digital, so we are changing. And over the last couple of years, we've really taken an analog bank and made it digital. I run everything to do with consumer payments, wealth, private banking, and then the digital for the group as a whole.
Perfect. It sounds like you've got your plate full there. Thanks, Ashok. And completing our panel today, we are delighted to be joined by MJV's CEO, Mr. Mauricio Vianna. Mauricio, we have finally been able to get you on Tech Innovation Talks. Good day to you. Tell me, what are you looking forward to sharing with our listeners?
It's a pleasure to be here to participate at this Tech Innovation Talk. I think the important message that I would like to share actually are a couple related to our trends. So in the financial field, some of the changes that we have seen in the financial field, especially due to the pandemic. So how banks have adapted and how the landscape has changed in terms of priorities due to the pandemic.
Excellent. Talking of trends, recently on Tech Innovation Talks, it's become a bit of a ritual to start our episodes by looking at some of the trends coming our way in the chosen sector. So from a banking perspective, Ashok, what should we be looking out for? What does the future of financial services look like?
It's become a little fashionable to say that banking should be boring. But in reality, banking has become really, really fascinating, really fast-paced, and very, very, very exciting, because we are seeing the technology transformation of finance. So finance is something that interlinks everybody at a very, very basic level. The pandemic has really made every single company a financial services company to some extent. It's been clearly digital. It's been a period of inflection for digital. Digital is going up dramatically, and therefore, if you're going to do a lot more digital and e-commerce, you're going to do at least payments. And then credit is not very far from payments. And therefore, every single company has become, to some extent, a financial services company. It's a great opportunity for us to become a part of the ecosystem across multiple industries, or in fact, across all industries.
Continuing this kind of trends theme, and talking about a particularly prominent trend, the use of APIs. Is this an approach that's gaining more and more relevance in the market? And how can APIs be utilized to integrate data and transfer information with greater efficiency?
So, Paul, that's exactly it, right? If you again say that you're going to participate in various ecosystems with various companies, the only way to connect seamlessly with all these companies is via APIs, right? So you allow companies to pull through the kind of products and services that they want, and therefore having a front suite. So think about Barclays front suite as the Barclays Developer Network, where we expose all our APIs, which allow companies, individuals, fintechs, everybody to come and actually draw upon our capabilities to deliver for their customers.
Nice. Mauricio, anything to add to that?
Yes, the API concept is not a new concept. It dates back into 1940s, and it has evolved, throughout the years, reaching a very important stage in the 90s with the concept of service-oriented architecture. So it's an excellent way to encapsulate data inside an organization. I mean, you can imagine if all the data of different of the banks would be exposed to anyone to consume it without any governance, that would be terrible. So very dangerous. So APIs, what they do is we analyze the data and we publish through the interfaces of the APIs exactly what needs to be consumed. So it's an excellent way to organize the communication across different applications inside different organizations.
Ashok, I can imagine when we talk about data, Barclays has to handle a huge amount of data. How do you make sure as a bank that you handle that data responsibly and respect your customers?
So, Paul, couple of things that way, right? First of all, we comply with all local laws and regulations. And in Europe, GDPR is a very, very big deal. And we've made all our systems, product services, all compliant with GDPR. Number two, I think you're absolutely correct that, we have a lot of data. But today, hand on heart, can I say that I'm leveraging that data to the fullest extent possible? I would find it hard to say that. Having said that, the opportunity to leverage all the data that we have is phenomenal, is absolutely phenomenal. And that's some of the things that we're really working on as to how do you make the bank with all the data that we have, first of all, bring that data so that different parts of the bank can leverage that data to deliver a better outcome for our customers and our clients, right? Two, how do you actually make that whole thing artificial intelligence ready, so AI ready, so that in real time we are developing options and opportunities for our clients and our customers, and do all of that while truly respecting customer privacy and making sure the customer is aware of what his or her data is being used for.
Yeah, it sounds like you really have to find a balance when you're talking about banking and finance of using that data responsibly. And obviously, as you say, there's so many options out there, but you have to really find that balance. Mauricio, anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I guess consumers are more and more concerned about the way their data is being shared, and I do agree with Ashok in terms of the opportunities, immense opportunities of using data as a as a starting point to generate new applications. One excellent way that we particularly at MJV have seen to leverage the data is by actually understanding the consumer needs and approaching data from this perspective. The and we have been working for more than 14 years now with design thinking, and it's an excellent way to actually understand the use cases. Because I've been to several events, several hackathons on how to explore the data, but people over there, they sometimes get lost in without any insights on how to start using this data. So by bringing what consumer needs, consumer behavior, it's very important for us to define the different use cases that bring values to the consumer.
It sounds like in many cases, Mauricio, people are kind of jumping a step ahead without actually doing all of the stages of what needs to be utilized to really get the benefits out of data. Ashok, I think I'd be amiss not to ask Barclays head digital officer a question about digital transformation. So let's look at some statistics. Traditional banks that have not yet transformed are losing more than 40% of revenue to digital competition. How is Barclays tackling the digitization of financial services to keep its market position? And in your opinion, how important is digital transformation for banking industry?
So, Paul, look, there's absolutely no doubt that we have to completely digitize our entire operations. No question about that, right? And like we kind of talked briefly before, I think COVID was an inflection point and accelerated that journey quite dramatically. So I don't think there's any doubt that that has to happen. Okay. Uh, there's no doubt that there's a tremendous amount of money, a lot of effort, a lot of smart people getting into fintech, doing some really, really good work. No question about that. Uh, the thing is, fintechs by definition start very, very, very narrow, right? And they go deep within that narrow range, right? For them, it is a race to scale. And scaling is very, very, very hard to do. Once they scale, then they can expand, but initially they have to scale, and scaling is very hard to do. We already have the scale. So the question then is, can we digitize faster than can they scale, right? And that is really the race. If we can digitize faster than they can scale, we will win. If they scale faster than we can digitize, they will win. And if you were a history student for the last 328 years, you would essentially say Barclays has won. Now, you and I can take a contrarian bet and say, no, 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 after 328 years, things will change. I'm not sure I want to take that bet. I feel pretty confident that the amount of work that we've done, keeps us ahead. Frankly, the truth is, I don't think this is a question of fintech versus incumbent. I think the best outcome has arisen when the two have partnered, right? We have struck multiple partnerships with fintech companies. It has allowed us to digitize and automate much, much, much faster because there are certain areas you can't do everything, right? We have a very, very wide waterfront. You can't do everything. So if you're launching a new product or a service, just partner with a fintech and you're done. And that gives that particular fintech scale. So both we win, they win. So it's a real win-win a solution because ultimately, if the customer wins, all of us win. So I would actually phrase it and say the real thing is how do you partner with some of these fintechs to accelerate your own journey?
Taking Ashok's metaphor of winning the race, Mauricio, what can MJV offer to kind of help these companies to win that race?
Um, oh, that's a great question. MJV has been partnering with several banks in the past 10 years. One of our let's say characteristics is that MJV is an end-to-end company, meaning that we can help companies with their strategies all the way through the customer experience into the implementation. So this we've been helping some big international banks to spin off some of their ideas, that we are turning those ideas into companies, into real companies. It's a different approach that we've been taking with some banks. Instead of going to a fintech and necessarily partnering, we have done this also helping out with the interface between the fintech and the bank, which we know that in many cases Barclays is much more evolved in that sense. But in many banks that we find that the internal bureaucracy, especially if you're talking about procurement, if you want to integrate a fintech with a large bank, and the payment terms are like 30, 60 days, net days, I mean, you're going to kill this startup, this fintech. So we help with the internal process of the bank to adapt to the fintech, but also in terms of the systems integration, because again, this is very. I mean, the bank has has to run the bank, and how do you integrate these fintechs with with the applications, with the checkings account, with the investments systems. So you definitely, companies need help, and we are here to. We have been successfully helping many banks all over the world.
Excellent. Let me switch focus slightly now to the fascinating world of ESG. Sustainability has become an urgent debate. The need to adopt best practices has become even more evident in recent years, as it plays a crucial role in superior business transformation. Mauricio, am I right in saying that's no different in the financial sector?
Definitely, Paul. Absolutely. Sustainability, it's an urgent debate. The pandemic definitely has accelerated the perception, that the world needs help. We cannot consume as we are consuming. Just there is a need to start designing our products and our services in such a way that we can recycle our products and recycle our service. The financial sector has a huge responsibility also in terms of helping out with this change. And we've seen in the past, in April 2021, where the UN, formed a group of, initially, I was looking at about 48 banks, which has grown now into 100 banks or so, with more than, $100 trillion of investments. And I was looking at the list, and Barclays is there, Ashok. Congratulations.
Fantastic. Ashok, continuing this ESG thread, how is technology supporting Barclays to create a more inclusive financial environment? I'm thinking, for example, of how you streamline processes to make them more user-friendly, or how you support vulnerable groups to be included in the financial system.
So, Paul, many, many such examples, right? Technology helps in many ways, right? Think about, if you just think about, for example, financial inclusion, helping people improve their credit scores or getting onto the ladder, right? How we can give advice to do that, how we help customers who are vulnerable, right? Debit cards which have got photographs on them, so that it's easy for difficulty with color to be able to realize how to use the debit card, or a mobile banking app that speaks to the customer, as opposed to having to hear talking ATMs. These are all, I mean, and I can go on and on. There's so many such examples, right? Even on the corporate space, right? Helping these corporates, even fossil fuel companies, helping them raise capital to get onto the other side, right? And to change their business model, price the capital for them correctly. Finance plays a massive role in this whole thought process, and we take it extremely seriously, and are spending a lot of time and effort identifying opportunities that we can help move the agenda.
Yeah, Ashok, this is slightly off script, but sometimes I feel it's quite hard to stay up to date with everything from a personal perspective. What do you do to kind of keep yourself in check with regards to staying up to date with modern trends and keeping on point with the changing world that we live in? Because it is an incredibly changing environment that we're now working in.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Paul. The speed of change is just so incredible that trying to keep, your head spins, even thinking about it. You know, at least what I try and read as much as I can, talk to smart people like Mauricio, and learn from them. Visit companies, see what's going on, just extend the antenna, so to speak. So you've taken a lot of stuff. All doesn't come in very structured and stuff like that, but you never know where a thought from this end sparks a thought at that end, right? See what others are doing in the space. Uh, Listen to webinars. So no magic bullets, Paul, unfortunately.
No, I guess the lesson to learn from that, Ashok, is just to not always go alone on things, right? To kind of take in the information from the people around us.
Sorry, Paul, let me give you one notion there, right? Because I think it's a very important thing. You know, the old model where we studied from, call it age 5 to age 25, right? And in 20 years, we learned a whole bunch of content. And that content stood us good for the next, call it 40 years. And at 65, you kind of peacefully retired and everything was fine and your content was relevant for the next 40 years. That is gone, completely gone. So if you think about that carefully, you got to say that, look, I'm now going to school not to learn content, but I'm going to learn how to learn. If I can learn how to learn, that is the only skill that will keep me relevant. Now, not for 40 years. You can't stop working at 65 because life expectancy has gone up. You simply economically can't afford to stop at 65. So for the next 50 years. So learning how to learn for the next 50 years and how our educational systems change, how people like all of us on this podcast, impress upon our children, our nieces, our nephews, that is the kind of skill that's going to make a difference in the future, I think is really, really critical.
Yeah, and people who don't accept that are just going to be left behind. I think you've really hit on a good point there. Mauricio, recently there has been increased pressure on companies and governments towards taking more environmental responsibility within finance and business in general. What steps need to be taken to achieve these standards? How can technology be utilized to build a more sustainable society?
Investment in clean technology, I think, is crucial. Um, so, for instance, in the northeast of Brazil, there has been a mass investment in developing plants to generate clean energy, um, liquefied hydrogen, for instance, that where you take the seawater, through and evaporate it and separate the hydrogen. So investing more and more in technologies that are clean is definitely one way to go. And banks again have a huge responsibility there because they finance the the companies, by not only financing, giving loans for those types of investments. In terms of ESG, I would say the sustainable development goals from the United Nations. They address several issues there, the 17 points that are very important, that for each company to start looking at them and really taking them seriously, because it's very difficult for, even if you live in the developed world. And Ashok and I, we also come from an emerging countries. You can't be happy if your peer is not happy. The full happiness will come when everyone is well worth. And so paying attention to those 17 sustainability goals is the way to start, I would say.
Mauricio, is there anything that you can share from a project or something that MJV's done with regards to sustainably trying to improve the environment? Is there anything on those lines that you can share with us?
Sure. I was talking before about circular design, and we are currently, for the past 2 years, we created a sustainability center at MJV. And we are in the process now of developing a solution for recycling electronics, like batteries. There's some statistics about that 30% of the equipments in Europe, they are designed in such a way that they can be recycled. 10% in the United States and only 1% in Brazil. So this is one. The second has been an investment that this may actually interest some banks, because this is a project right into like towards the end of the Amazon River. There is a city called there's actually an island called Island of Marajoz, and a city called a place called Curralinhos, with the least development, human development index in Brazil. and we've been helping there the acai. I don't know if everyone is familiar, but acai fruit. Create you can create an excellent, very tasty juice. It's purple juice that many people who like to exercise, they drink. And the acai producers, they have a big challenge on how to to actually manufacture the and harvest this fruit from the Amazon forest. And so we are looking there, we're investing to understand what are the potential technologies that could be used in order not to waste, after waste the acai fruit once they are harvested. So definitely that's also another project that I'm sure banks would also be interested in helping out in investing in that area to help the population, the local population, to grow.
So Ashok, moving on to our last couple of questions. Much of what we talked about so far centers around accountability and transparency, essentially allowing customers to understand what they are consuming and from whom, to better know how best to manage their finances. That said, Ashok, what does customer centricity mean to Barclays? Can you give some examples of how you enable your customers to use banking solutions in a natural and frictionless way?
In the past, what used to happen was that if a bank was offering a series of products, and those series, every single product was a best in class product, then the customer made a choice based on product, right? And the customer went and picked a mortgage, the customer went and picked a investment account or whatever. What has changed is technology, right? And so technology has now allowed us to link these things across. So let's take a simple example, Paul, where somebody is looking to buy a house. The process of buying a house starts with starts really with a customer starting to save slight amount of money to put down a down payment, or going to his or her parents and saying, can you help me with the down payment? So effectively, a mortgage starts with a savings product, right? So if leveraging the data, which is possible today, I see that a customer is looking on rightmove.com, zoopla.com, zillow.com, whichever the relevant property website is there. If I understand that the customer is in the house buying moment, right? It's everything from down payment to mortgage to living expenses to financing the mortgage to setting up home, the decoration of the home, lawyers, solicitors, all of that kind of put together. That is the true meaning of customer centricity, where you're saying the customer's need is to actually move from a rented place to an owned apartment or an owned house. How do you actually take care of that total ecosystem around that, as opposed to just thinking of, hey, I'll wait for the customer to come and tell me, by the way, I want a mortgage. Because if you wait for the customer to come and tell you I want a mortgage, chances are the customer has already gone and is now seeking out the lowest price mortgage, right? So you lose a lot of opportunity as such. And that's why we have been forced to move from product to customer centricity. And that is what I mean by customer centricity.
Maybe Ashok, you can share with us and talk a little bit about some of the mistakes that you've seen companies make. Obviously not naming any names, but maybe I can push you a little bit more on this topic to describe some of the mistakes that you've seen made within this environment.
I tell you, the root cause of mistakes is not ever thinking about it end to end, right? See, if you think about how digital evolution has happened, it started with us taking a lot of brochureware and a lot of our material and just putting it onto the website, right? So as an information kind of tool. Then we started doing things like, allowing the customer to be able to do some kind of transactional capability. From transactional capability, we realized that just having a fancy front end is not enough. You've got to automate within your ecosystem. So the minute the customer touched the bank, right to the back end of the bank and back. Then we realize, hey, even that is not enough. You got to think about a broader ecosystem. What is the customer really trying to get done? And how do you get it done? And now what we're saying is, hey, you got to play in a broad ecosystem which involves a lot of other partners. Like in the example that I said, I mean, it's lawyers, it's solicitors, it's contractors, all of whom, it could be the parents, all of whom are facilitating this entire customer need of buying and living in a property. So, of course, along the way, we've kind of made mistakes of actually narrowing the focus and not taking the broadest possible view. Now, of course, we're trying to take a broader possible view, and in the way, you kind of keep improving, keep getting better and better at doing this.
Mauricio, it sounds like Ashok is kind of saying that it's so important to have something behind what you're showing. You can't just have this fancy dashboard or fancy bit of information. There needs to be substance behind what you're providing for customers.
Yeah, I mean, I could not agree more with Ashok in terms of looking um, towards for the full experience, the end to end. All pieces needs to work well. I mean, just sharing an experience that I had recently in the US in purchasing a new phone for one of our employees. Um, I actually went to the store just sometimes I like to do this exercise of understanding the experience of some of our potential customers, and this was interesting because the store was beautiful, everything around was beautiful, dashboards, everything was very nice, but one piece was not working, which was the IT piece, the IT system. So it took forever to be able to configure and activate the phone. So this actually just this small example shows how everything has to be in sync. So the IT systems needs to be in place so that whatever has been designed as part of the customer experience can work. So all the pieces need to fall, to be aligned together.
Okay, Ashok and Mauricio, so far we've managed to talk about things in a fairly pleasant manner. We haven't touched on the pandemic too much. We haven't talked about some of the nastier things that are happening in the world right now. But it's time to kind of switch focus slightly and look at the undisputable challenges that companies like Barclays and in the financial world in general we face with fraud. Statistics show us that data fraud increased by 70% during the pandemic. What can be done to fight back against these criminal activities?
Well, I guess there's two fronts. One is data is fraud prevention, and the second is fraud detection. In terms of fraud prevention, we know that many of the frauds, they happen um, internally from inside our own companies. So really working within the employee culture, it's something critical in that sense. Helping, having policies of clean tables, things like that really help. Second is knowing your customer. So having a very good process in terms of understanding who your customer is. Um, and this is also related to data. So Ashok was talking about the importance of data. We have done a project recently with a bank to help them reduce their fraud by analyzing the data transactions, the credit score of their customers. And this particular bank was using, they were renting, selling like POS payment machines. And through data science, we were able to discover that some of their customers with so credit score that were requesting the POS to be sent to their personal homes, those were the most likely ones that would fraud the system. So using data definitely is an important tool to avoid fraud.
Ashok, do you want to touch on fraud as well? I know as a Londoner myself, as an Englishman, there's been some quite high profile cases of data fraud in the UK. I'm specifically thinking of what happened with the NHS. Did you want to touch on data fraud at all?
Unfortunately, technology is available to the good guys, technology is available to the bad guys as well. And the bad guys are using technology quite aggressively. And you're absolutely right that both fraud and scams, and basically scam is even more dangerous than a fraud because fraud, at least you're not doing it to yourself. Scam, literally you're doing it to yourself. So how do the banks stop you from harming yourself, right? It's a much harder thing to do. Uh, Look, I think the regulators in the UK have taken it very, very seriously and required a whole bunch of things. Uh, I think one of the things that they've done really nicely is confirmation of pay. So, Paul, I don't know if you've seen, but if you go onto your mobile banking app or your internet website, and you key in the details of, let's say, sending me money, please do, by the way. If you do that, uh, it shows, it actually tells you that the name and the account number match as per the database of the receiving bank, which is actually quite basic, but it took banks a lot of heavy lifting to get that done to the point that Mauricio was making around data, right? That way, when you're sending me money, you are assured that you're sending it to me and my account, and that's been confirmed by the bank, right? So confirmation of payee is one very, very good example. It stops fraud. Scams are, of course, much more difficult, and banks, like what we've tried to do is we've tried to highlight at the point of the transaction, do you really know this person? Be careful. These are the kind of things that could potentially happen. Please reconfirm this. And cases where we feel, that suddenly there's some transactions which uh, are out of the footprint of what the customer normally does, we introduce friction into the process, right? And we don't process the transaction with immediate, with immediacy. And you try and say, hey, let's give this some hold to see if this really is a transaction that the customer wants to kind of get through.
Yeah, I think from a personal perspective, it's the one area where I find technology can be slightly frightening with regards to the Internet of Things and how you can just, use a watch to pay a potentially expensive bill. It's the one area where maybe Mauricio, from my perspective, I feel like technology can slightly scare me. Is there anything that you can say to put my fears at ease?
Constantly, technology is evolving. The most important thing is to keep your systems updated, and I think that's the major vulnerability of companies, and we personally speaking, that we sometimes there's a new version of a software. You need to update the operating systems of your watch, and you forget, and that's where the vulnerability happens. Paul.
So it's those small details. Perfect. Okay, so moving on to our last question today, and how the time has flown. But I've heard plenty, and we've all heard plenty about the benefits of open finance and open banking, a movement that has changed the face of banking, allowing users to share their banking information with third parties through APIs. Can you first share some insights into the impact of this movement? And Ashok, maybe afterwards you can touch on how you ensure that you implement, again, safety at Barclays, considering the customer data being used.
So open finance is an evolution of open banking, where and the UK is very advanced, by the way. I mean, compared to other countries in the world, we definitely pay attention and support our customers also there. Well, with open finance, basically the bank is not only the bank is an ecosystem where all the investments of the consumer, of the customer, their savings, their cash flow, this is all open for other companies, other financial, uh, and not only financial, but certified companies can access this. So it really gives an opportunity for the consumer to determine who is going to use, its data, his or her data, um, and gives the opportunity for new companies to become your financial advisor, your wealth management, and it brings, like Ashok was mentioning, in my humble opinion here, my 2 cents, it's a big competition there, because suddenly the consumer has the power to control what information is going to be shared. And if someone develops a better, let's say, wealth management, financial advising system, they will switch. So it brings a big challenge, and I'm sure banks are prepared, and Ashok, leading the team. And certainly Barclays will be in very good shape there.
Yeah, Ashok, do you want to share your views on open banking, what Barclays is doing to ensure their customers are safe?
When the regulators first started talking about open banking, actually, I got pretty scared because I said, a lot of our assets are going to now become out in the open, and we will lose, access. It'll no longer be proprietary data; it'll be other data. And so, what does that mean to us? And I quickly realized that if I get into that kind of mindset, I will be playing defense. So we literally set up two teams, a blue team and a red team. And we said, okay, blue team, you think about all the opportunities that the bank gets from using open banking. And the red team, we said, you find ways on what we should do to defend. And honestly, Paul, you'll be surprised as to the number of opportunities that came up as a result, right? And we were the first bank in the UK to actually aggregate data on our mobile app. Since then, it is a question of saying, how do you push to, in the first instance, get a much better understanding of a customer's affordability so that you could give the customer a better deal on a mortgage, a loan, a credit card, a car loan, a personal loan, all of that kind of good stuff, right? Two, how could you make it much, much, much easier for a customer to actually take the data, hold that data, and then securely transfer that data to a trusted another source? So think about it and you say, you want to get a mortgage, right? The amount of data that you've got to provide is incredible, right? If we could kind of package that data up and allow the customer to do it very, very easily, that would be, the customer would love us for that, right? So, I can go on about examples. Third example could be, we've got something called Premier Banking, which we offer a higher level of personalized service for somebody who earns over £75,000 and banks with us or has £100,000 with us. We say, okay, pal, if you've got accounts in two or three places, a better way for us to identify that you're a Premier customer, yeah, come and taste what Premier Banking looks like. And for 3 months, if you like it, then move your money to us and become a Premier customer with Barclays. So, the opportunities kind of started expanding quite rapidly, right down to saying, now, why should we stick to open banking? Why not open insurance? Why not open pensions, right? Such that we allow the customer to capture a holistic view. Because one of the things we realized was at the end of the day, if you think, Paul, think about your phone. You must be spending, I can guarantee you, at least 2.5, 3 hours a day on your phone, right? Chances are you've got 30, 40 apps on your phone. But chances are there are 4 or 5 apps that you use mostly every single day. Very high chance that your banking app is one of those. We have we have today about 11.5 million customers. These customers come to our app on an average of 28 times a month. So that's something like 300 million logins every single month, or 3.6 billion logins a year, right? Now, if you were owning a store or a retail outlet and had that kind of footfall, your mouth would be watering. And we said, why isn't our mouth watering with this kind of footfall? We are a trusted app. So the customer would prefer to integrate and aggregate with us as opposed to anybody else, right? And so we said, therefore, open banking is a big opportunity, and we can't put limits in our own mind. Expand the limits, see what you can do, and a lot of such opportunities emerged.
Fantastic. Well, that pretty much brings things to a conclusion today. I know from my personal perspective, the big takeaway I'm going to think about is kind of making sure that you're seeing banking and opportunities in the right way and looking at the positives. So there you have it. A big thank you to our panel, to Ashok and Mauricio for sharing all their valuable insights today. But suppose you're keen for even more opinion on finance. In that case, I can wholeheartedly recommend our financial service report, which touches on a lot of what we've covered in today's conversation. You can access the report via our website, and we will leave a link to it in the description of this podcast and all your favorite suppliers. Again, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. So that just about does it for now. This is Paul Sithwache signing off for Tech Innovation Talks, powered by MJV. So until next time, take care and keep innovating.